The pipeline to prison can start as early as elementary school, although we have noted in our podcast previously that African Americans are seemingly assumed guilty from birth. Policing tactics have come under scrutiny, and with films like Just Mercy, the court system doesn't fare much better. It's one thing to be arrested by the police, but what happens once you have your day in court? Racial disparity in sentencing has decreased over the years, but the rate of African Americans being sentenced to prison is 5 times that of whites. What's going on? And can there truly be justice for all? This is Loki Mulholland, and it's time to get uncomfortable. Well, today I'm joined by my co-host, freedom writer Levon Brown. Levon, how you doing?
It's good to be here.
And our guest today is Judge Rupert Byrdsong. Judge Birdsong, how you doing? Welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Loki.
Hey, now, Levon, I just want to let you know this isn't a hit job. I'm not setting you up. Judge Birdsong isn't here to open up some of your old cases or anything, okay?
I think most of them have been resolved now.
All right. Most of them?
I've learned never say all. They might come up with something else. So, but I think they're all done now.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. So a little background on Judge Birdsong. So first of all, our parents, my mom and your mom went to school together at Tougaloo.
That's correct. Class of 1964.
That's right. That's right. That crazy white woman.
She's a pioneer.
Oh man, I just love talking to your mom. Though. I mean, man, the energy she has and stuff. I can't keep up with her.
They came up in a different time, and yeah, we're grateful to have such awesome moms.
Well, let me give a little background. So I'm going to read a portion of your bio here, but Judge Rupert A. Byrdsong was appointed to the bench in 2014 and presently sits in the Stanley Moss Courthouse in Department 28. A founding member of the Association of African American California Judicial Officers, Judge Birdsong is a frequent lecturer on legal issues. Judge Birdsong volunteers his time mentoring young lawyers and speaks to students in high schools, colleges, and law schools throughout Los Angeles. He also volunteers his time to interview prospective students for Vanderbilt University Law School. Because of his work and contributions to the community, Judge Birdsong was recognized in Ebony Magazine's Power 100 for 2018. Judge Birdsong is a graduate of Morehouse College in 1991 and Vanderbilt Law School in 1994. We're in a good company, Levon.
Sounds it.
Yeah. So, many people will argue that if you don't want to do the time, then don't do the crime. However, we know that the time for the crime isn't the same for everyone. So, what's going on here? I mean, I think a lot of people don't understand the general process of what actually happens once someone gets arrested to do the time that they're sitting in front of you.
You basically have 3 stages. So the first stage would be the out in the field when the person interacts with the police officer. Police officer has all types of discretion whether they will make an arrest when they decide to engage. You have I guess a tier of reasons why they may stop somebody. You have a reasonable suspicion or you have probable cause. That is that you've witnessed something in your sight that would lead you to believe that a crime has been committed. So the officer has all kinds of discretion with regard to when they interact with someone in the field to make an arrest or do some counseling to get them to get on the right track. I had a small case. This was in traffic where the gentleman was in his late 60s, and he got pulled over for not having his lights on. There is a law that says, at night you're supposed to have your lights on, right? So the police officer pulled him over and gave him a ticket and basically set it up so this was going to go to court. It ended up in my courtroom. Now, I counseled, when the case came before me, I asked the officer when I called the case, I said, "Why are we here?" And he said, "Well, because we had somebody who broke the law." I said, "Wait, stop, wait a minute. But why are we really here?" I said, let me put this out there for you to consider. So you see the man, he pulls out of the 7-Eleven. He doesn't have his lights on. When you pull him over and you talk to him, you see that he's not someone who's trying to commit any crimes. He's kind of up there in age, just getting something to drink and not anything alcoholic, just get something to drink from a 7-Eleven. And as he's pulling out, he just forgot to turn his lights on. So once you saw that and you talked to him and discovered that this is what he was doing at that time, why didn't you advise this man, sir, you need to have your lights on at nighttime. It's not safe. Please turn your lights on and have a good evening. You didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, well, I said, well, think about it. Had you done that, a couple of things would have happened. One, you would have enforced the law by asking him to turn on his light. And two, you would have not had to take off from your regular assignment to come down to court to testify. He wouldn't have to come down here and miss a day of work to come down to defend this charge. And I wouldn't have to have this case on my docket when we're really talking about, is this something that we should be spending time on? You have more credibility with the community by having that conversation in the field versus giving him a citation to say that, I got a ticket today. That's the type of thing that needs to happen more than it does. How do you get people to do that? Well, I think what's important is you need to have law enforcement who are familiar with the communities they serve. They probably it would be nice if they actually came from those communities, so you have a relationship, a rapport, and the people that you see all the time. Therefore, you have an ongoing dialogue about how do we keep the community safe, what's going on, are people doing things that they shouldn't do, and that's how we prevent those cases from coming on. Let's go to the second stage. Let's go to where, okay, you have the interaction with the police. The police makes the arrest, and then it gets sent to the prosecutor's office, the DA's office, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The DA also has a lot of discretion with regard to when they review the report to see whether a crime has been committed. In some instances, is how they interpret the facts, how they interpret the interaction as to whether or not the case is then actually filed as a complaint where the person is charged versus looking at it and dismissing it before it even comes to my court. And of course, the third interaction is when it does come to my court, when the prosecutor decides, okay, a crime has been committed, we're going to file the charge, and now it comes before me. But then I also have the ability to look at the case based on the appropriate motion from the defense, and I can dismiss it before a trial if I see that the facts are not in support of a crime being committed. I would do that routinely when I had my criminal assignment. There would be situations where it was obvious to me that there was racial profiling involved, that the officer had no bases to stop the person, to interact with the person for which they now find, quote, contraband, or discover that they had been driving under the influence. I had a particular case one time where this gentleman, he was a black man, he blew a .22, which is almost 3 times the legal limit. A .08 is considered driving under influence and is illegal for a DUI. However, the basis for stopping him, there was no reason for him to do that. He just kind of made up a reason to stop him. And when I questioned him about that and determined that it was not a reasonable basis to stop him, therefore, you should have never had the interaction. You should have never have discovered that this guy was driving under the influence. And our laws say that when that happens, that's an unfair arrest, and everything that flows from that is inadmissible. So I suppressed all of that evidence and I dismissed the case. Now, does that mean that I condone the person who was driving under the influence? Of course not. And in fact, after I dismissed the case, I brought his attorney back at Chambers and let him know, your client dodged a very significant bullet here. That's because I have to be true and right that there was probable cause that this arrest should have occurred. It wasn't done properly, therefore I was required to dismiss it, in my view. However, if your client ever does anything like that again, please know that the karma gods are likely not going to be nice to him the next time. So I hope this is an opportunity for you to tell him that he should not drink and drive. So I did all kinds of things in that one case. I think I was fair to this person who was profiled, but for me seeing that, he would have been thrown into the system. He probably would have pled. Now that puts him on probation for 3 years. And that puts him to now have a device on his car before he can drive it. I mean, so there are all kinds of other complications and implications from that one decision to either let this go forward or to stop it where it should have been stopped. So those are the types of things that happen. And if you don't have people at these different levels in the field, the officer, in the prosecutor's office, and then on the bench, again, those are 3 opportunities where justice can be made if people have the right conscience, and people are looking at it in the proper way. Or it's also 3 opportunities where you can get thrown in the system and your life has changed forever.
My work has taken me to a lot of places, and I've been fortunate to meet some incredible people. But when I came to Selma and met Joanne Blackman Bland, I knew I was in the presence of greatness. Joanne was 11 years old when she was attacked on the Edmund Pettus Bridge on Bloody Sunday in 1965. She wasn't old enough to vote, but understood its importance enough to be there. After Selma is an in-depth look at how our right to vote has eroded since the signing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The fight for the right to vote continues. Get informed. You can find After Selma on Amazon Prime or visit LokiMulholland.com to purchase a copy for your collection.
Let me ask a question. So let's take for the instance of the officer that pulled the guy over. He didn't have a reason to do that, but let's say he pulled him over. Now, are they trained the way you were thinking when they came before you? Are they trained that way as police officers when they're in the academy?
I don't think they have any type of training that deals with having empathy, giving people the benefit of doubt. I think they're trained to suspect the worst,
Right.
to not give the benefit of the doubt, and in particular, they don't have any type of that I'm aware of, and we hear people talk about it, have the sensitivity training and the bias training, so that when they do interact with people of color, they're not automatically going, okay, we know this person is guilty.
Right.
And that's a problem. That's a problem. And then it goes on the other side as well, in terms of having the assumption that when the person is white, that everything is cool. Let me give you an example of how it works on the other side. So again, in my DUI court, there was this white woman, she's fairly young, who was in the entertainment industry. I don't think she was famous, but she was someone who had a lot of responsibility, and she considered herself to be important. And so she came in for a probation checkup to determine if she'd done her community service, had she paid her fines, was she going to her AA classes. And of course, she hadn't done any of those things. And it was clear to me that she just thought that, well, I'm going to be excused from having to do this because I'm this important person.
Right.
And therefore I need to keep it moving. So when she came to me, I'm like, so where's your progress? Oh, well, I just wasn't able to do that, but I got this big project back at the job, and so I need to get there. I'm like, no, you're not going there. And she said, what? I mean, she was like flabbergasted that I was selling her. No, you're not going to just get off. And I said, wait a minute, look here. You have this room full of people who are here to report that they've done the things that they're supposed to do. So, is it fair for you not to do the same things that I'm asking them to do? Or let me put it this way, it would be unfair for me to just let you go when you haven't done the things you're supposed to do. And she was like, but no, I can't. No, I'm sorry, ma'am. That's not how this works. And so, she had to spend a little time, to deal with that probation violation. So fast forward for her next progress report, and I remembered her as fast. I mean, you see a lot of these cases, so you don't remember everybody, but I remembered her. I said, "Oh yeah, this was the entitled one who just thought that it was insane that she was not going to be able to go back and do her project, so somebody else is going to have to do it." So when she came back 3 months later, I said, "How you doing, ma'am?" And she said, "I'm doing really, really great." I said, "Really? Why?" And she said, "It was because of you. Because when you held me accountable for my actions, it caused me to look at myself and to realize that I need to be more responsible. And it's really has changed my whole outlook on everything that I do. So I really want to thank you for doing that." And I thought, wow. I mean, I had no idea that I would get that type of consequence simply by not giving her any favoritism, which I'm pretty sure some of my other colleagues would have because of her demographic, her status in society.
See, and I'm thinking she's playing you.
Well, she wasn't happy when she had to go to the side door and spend a few days in our facilities. She didn't appreciate that at all. But again, we've seen so many times when usually someone who looks like her is given that pass, like, "Oh, don't worry about it, we'll give you more time." But if it's someone who looks like me, "Oh, you're being irresponsible. You're not being
What was
focused."
that?
That's
You
my
what?
daughter. That was my daughter.
Oh, oh
I'm
my
sorry.
gosh.
Man, whoa!
I'm
I
sorry.
thought I thought somebody was being choked or something. Jesus Christ!
These microphones are very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
All right.
okay,
So
Sorry
just
about
just for our listeners, there is a child in the background, not getting choked. It's just a child. Okay.
okay.
So now I want to jump back just a little bit for a second because you had made this comment about the guy who pulled out of the parking lot at like the 7-Eleven didn't have his lights on.
Right.
Okay. So African American.
Yes.
Okay.
He
Cop
was
was
like,
white.
cop was white.
Okay.
Yes.
So was the cop just kind of sitting there waiting for people to come out of 7-Eleven without their lights on? Or like, is it like, I'll let him go down the road for a couple of seconds and see if he actually turns on his lights? Or was he just
You
kind of
know,
just waiting?
I think he was just in a position where he made the observation and
Mm-hmm.
he made the decision to do something. Now, I don't blame him for that. I
Right.
actually don't blame him for that in terms
It's
of
just escalating it to the point
right.
to bring it into your
Right.
courtroom.
When he made the observation, it was appropriate for him to say, "Okay, hey man, you need to turn your lights on." But after, no, because mind you, we have had situations where people turn the lights out because they're up to doing
Sure.
something good. They want to hide their criminal activities. And I said, once you made that determination that this was not a person who had his lights off for any nefarious reason, that was the time that you use your good judgment to say, "Hey,
Right.
turn your light on, man. Be safe. Going about your way." You. I mean, how hard was that?
Yeah, but does this become an opportunity for the police to go, well, now that I've got him pulled over, let me check his trunk. Let me ask a few questions to see if I can't, find some drugs or whatever else with that assumption so I can.
And that we know that happens.
Okay.
We know that happens. And why does that happen? Well, I think if you read between the tea leaves, the assumption that a person of color is out there doing something wrong is an assumption that unfortunately many of these law enforcement people go to right away. Now, not all of them, but some do. And if they have an opportunity now to make things happen, they've been given an excuse to do that.
The thing that bothers me about what happened was first of all, let me, that happened to a friend of mine, but the cop just told him to turn the light on and go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. It doesn't happen all the time. The cop just said, he forgot to turn his light on. So turn your light on, and have a good evening. But you were talking to a single police officer, and that either one or two ways that went was he heard you, and next time he's not going to do that, or he's going to do it differently,
Mm-hmm.
or he heard you and he's going to make sure that the next time he does it differently or he does it the same, but he doesn't come in front of you if he can help it.
Well,
Uh,
he won't have
so,
that choice in terms of
so you're not
whether it
doing.
comes to me.
What bothers me is that there's no way to take what you just said to him and make it part of the policing.
Right. No, that's a good point, Levon. I can only hope that when I put in his spirit, if you do it the way that I told you to do, you are going to have more credibility in the community. You are going to be a better law enforcement officer. If he were right, if he were willing to share that exchange, we'd get some benefit.
Right.
How we could take that and put it into their curriculum and training, you are exactly right. That is a missing part, and that's something that you know we need to take to management and those who are doing the training to consider those variables.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
In my other life, I'm a filmmaker, and one of my more fascinating films I created is the award-winning film titled Black, White, and Us. It's about viewing racism through the lens of transracial adoptions in Utah. Utah? Yeah, Utah. It just so happens to be the transracial adoption capital of the world. So what happens when white families who didn't believe racism existed anymore adopts a black child? Find it on Amazon Prime or visit LokiMulholland.com to purchase a copy for your collection.
So you have this just a white police officer in a black judge's court. Do you experience, so if the bias that's being extended to the supposed felons, are you also feeling that bias from those white officers and so forth, or DAs and such?
Um,
Or do they know better because you're the judge and this is your court?
you like think they would know better. I
All
think
right.
when I first got there was I got more of a pushback because I had a civil background versus a criminal background. Before I got on the bench, I was a employment discrimination litigator and trial attorney. So my binary language was about discrimination and civil rights claims, race discrimination in the sense of employment, harassment, wrongful termination, those types of issues as it relates to employer versus employee. Uh, but so when I got to the criminal assignment, they're thinking, well, this guy doesn't have the background to understand. But ultimately that helped me because I didn't come to that position with a pro prosecution orientation or pro defense orientation. I'm seeing this right down the middle. If you could establish that something went down, then you're good to go. If you can't establish something went down, no, I'm not having it. And if y'all didn't cross your T's and dot your I's, I'm
Yeah,
dismissing it. I'm absolutely dismissing it.
but I'm a white cop, and and I pull over, I arrest this black guy. All right, I bring him before a black judge, and you let him go. I mean, of course you're gonna let him go. He's
No, no.
black. You're black. I mean, it's a thing.
And that is an absolute improper and unfair narrative that some people could reach that conclusion. But
Right.
this is how you deal with that. Because
Hmm.
again, my credibility is important. Um, Facts are facts, and in those situations where those cases were dismissed, I'm actually asking questions, and I'm establishing a record that demonstrates one, this officer was not credible. This officer was inconsistent. This officer's response did not match the report with regard to what he claimed happened. And that's the benefit of being able to ask questions. I was a heck of a trial attorney before I became a judge. And so I know how to cross examine a witness. you if you're on the witness stand, you better have your story as straight and tell the truth as much as possible, because I have been trained to see through the crap, if you will. Can I say that on this
Yeah, yeah,
interview?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Levon says worst on.
Okay, I can. I've I've been trained to be able to see through the crap, and then I can make those determinations. And so the record is clear that, hey, there was no reason for this to happen. And then I've told the prosecutors. Here's a scary part, and this is another thing that I'm still trying to find out how this training can take place. So I bring the prosecutor in and I give him the blues. Like, why in the world did y'all bring this nonsense in my court? You know good and well that this should not have been prosecuted. This case should have been dismissed before it got to me. And the word would be, well, the higher ups wanted us to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically have junior prosecutors, young attorneys with not as much experience, being told to prosecute cases that they actually don't believe in, but they don't have the ability to say no. Now that's a problem, obviously.
So you have cases where people are DAs or whomever are trying to set an example.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Exactly.
Well, remember that there's politics involved here. So the more cases that this upper the guy in the upper tier gets, the faster he moves up, and he is not interested in. See, you're sitting there as the judge, so you're one of the few that actually worry about justice. Many of the judges are partners with the police, or they're partners with the DA. The DAs are partners with the junior DAs, etc. So there's the only person sitting there that might be concerned about justice is the judge. And if he doesn't take an active role in the persecution of a person, what happens is he goes to jail, because that's points for the DA. That's the problem. I think what happens is you find yourself in the middle, because you can't tell the juniors what to do, and they are afraid to do anything because they might lose their job. Just as how they will, or they won't get the case the next time, so they can't move up. I think a lot of that goes on.
So Levon, I guess what I'm hearing is you have DAs with agendas,
Of course,
political agendas. Hey, I want to be tough. I want to be tough on crime. So they can flood a courtroom with a whole bunch of cases that are
right,
drug related, and of course, if it's drug related, it's probably black people, those sort
right,
of things, just because of the biases.
exactly. I got X number of convictions, and it's time for you to move up.
Mm.
Yeah.
Nobody's worried about what's right and wrong. They're worried about how many cases they get. By the way, that's why what's her name keeps running into problems.
Kamala Harris.
Yes, that's why she keeps running into problems, because they assume that that's what she did.
Mm.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I think that's why. So the judge is the only one that's sitting there that says, "Wait a minute, let's hold up on this. Maybe it didn't go the way you said." You're the only one, not you personally, but the judge is the only one sitting there who has an interest in justice.
Yeah. When I'm talking to law students and those who have interest in the criminal justice system, whether they on the criminal defense side or on the prosecution side, I'm always trying to put in their spirit, you know what, we need more black prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
We need prosecutors who have a desire to seek justice, not to make convictions.
Right.
And you have to have an enlightened thinking and the courage, because unfortunately we have witnessed a culture where justice is the last thing on anybody's mind,
Right.
even though ethically they are bound, one, to turn over any exculpatory evidence. They're bound by precedent to do that. Anything that's mitigating, they're bound to turn it over and share it with the other side. But time and time again, we see people not living up to those oaths, living up to those ethics, and we got to get rid of those people. Those people have no business in those positions of power, which will affect the trajectory of someone's life forever.
An Ordinary Hero was my first award-winning documentary. It's about the life of my mother, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland, and her participation in the civil rights movement. For most of us, our mothers are heroes because they're mothers, and mom is just mom. But when your mother's a civil rights icon, and yet you never really knew it, things change. Go check out An Ordinary Hero and find out how choosing to do what was right instead of what was easy helped change the world. You can find it on Amazon Prime, or visit LokiMulholland.com to purchase a copy for your collection.
Well, how do you get rid of them?
That's $1 million question. What I would try to do is, in terms of when I would see it, I would try to impress upon them, your credibility is on the line. Because just like the lawyers always go around asking, so what do you think about Judge Birdsong? What do you think about Judge Birdsong? We do the same thing. The judges will talk about the lawyers who come in who are not prepared, who are not credible, that they try to push the envelope that is inconsistent with the facts. And so I try to put that spirit of fear in their heads, like, if you undermine your credibility with these cases that you shouldn't bring forward, you're going to have even a harder time getting a case that should go forward to be believed. Because now it's like the boy who cried wolf, like, oh, here they come again. Here they come again. And sometimes that gets them to change. And it is about courage. It is about courage, and it's about culture. And it has to start from the top down regarding, look, our mission here is to get to the truth. And we can't be looking at the scoreboard to see how many convictions we have when we need to have cases resolved and disposed based on the merits. If someone did the crime, of course, they should do the time. But if the system is not carefully evaluating what happened, not allowing bias to inject improper considerations into these cases, that's a problem. It's a problem. Here's a perspective that a lot of people don't actually appreciate, and unfortunately, it's because of the way history has treated, the criminal justice system and people of color. The prosecutor's role is to keep the community safe. So, in the sense that when a crime has occurred and you have a victim, and that victim's family is affected by this crime that was perpetrated against them, the prosecutor's job is to protect that family, to protect the community. That's what they're supposed to do. But history tells us, and case after case has told us, that they haven't, I'm not saying wholesale, some haven't approached it with the objective is to protect the community, is to prosecute people that don't look like them.
Well, that is protecting the community, because who you're protecting it from. I mean, just like Trump was, hey, white suburbia,
Right.
So you're protecting the community by throwing a whole bunch of people of color into prison. Let's get them away from it, or at least create the illusion that that's taking place. Because most crimes against whites is from other white people.
Right.
But
yeah, the
perception is right. Interracial crime is not as big of a thing as intra.
That's correct.
And so, but the perception is they're going to come and get you. Mm-hmm. Meaning black people.
And Loki, don't you? I thought I saw in one of your documentaries. Historically, didn't we have these constables who were hired to make sure that slaves would not run away or to actually recapture them? Is that kind of the genesis of how some of these organizations?
Right. Yeah. That was. Yeah. Carol Anderson talked about that.
And so some of that is I guess, permeates the culture even today.
Yeah.
When you think about it in terms of, hey, our job is not just to prevent crime. Our job is to keep these blacks in order.
Right. Keep them in their place.
From not moving freely.
Right. Well, and then you have the whole system. So the whole system becomes this. I think about like the debtor's prison, which pretty much still exists in respects that all the fines that are heaped upon those who the criminals, right? That even when you get out of jail, you still have this debt you have to pay. Yes, your debt to society in respects that you did the time, but now you have a monetary debt, and you can't vote, and you can't do this, and you can't get a job, and so you could actually be thrown back into prison because you are you're in arrears. So the whole system is in place to maintain this.
I think what we
Now,
have
correct me
is,
if I'm wrong, Judge.
no, it's sort of like, to me anyway, it sounds like what happens is, we will tolerate all kinds of crime against us because we don't want to call the police to tell them what's happening.
Mm.
And when we do call the police overreact typically. And so we keep criminals among us because we don't want to go to the police because the police are unfair. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So the black community recognizes that the system is really not meant for them to begin with.
Right. Right. So we tolerate a lot of stuff that we really shouldn't.
Right.
And that's precisely why we need to have law enforcement with people from those communities. When they go out to recruit, they should be recruiting from within those communities, people who know the pulse and the temperature of what's going on in those communities. Someone who's not going to be a stranger, someone who understands, the things that are going on. Therefore, we don't have this escalation of interaction just because you have something going down.
Now let me give you the funky, white perspective on that. Now, this is a twisted perspective because white people don't even recognize this actually already takes place, but it takes place for white people. So to a white person, go, well, look, if you have a black cop in a black community, they're just going to let him get away with stuff. It's like, well, wait a second. White cops already let people in white communities get away with stuff. In respects of going, hey, just make sure you turn on your headlight. That's what I mean. That sort of stuff. They don't escalate it. White cops escalate things in black communities. But in the white community, hey, Loki, just make sure you turn on your lights again. Okay, sorry, officer. And so there's this idea that, and Levon, you brought this up in the Uncomfortable Truth, that you can't win because a black elected official, hey, they might actually want to be doing something, to solve some problems. But if you do it in the black community, well, now you're just catering to the black folks.
Right.
So you can't win.
You can't, and that's
And so let me ask you this then: if the police, let's say black officers are working in black communities, you're not seeing as many arrests because it's like they're not escalating things. And now the chief of police going, hey, wait a second, guys, are you really doing your job?
But is that the evidence of crime in the community, arrest?
Right.
See, when people look at it, depending on what matrix you're looking at to say, whether they're being effective or not. Of course, if you want to just look at numbers, like, oh, they let them get away with murder. But let's look at and do a survey of the community in terms of how safe they feel and what's happening within the community. That's really that's the data that they should be evaluating.
Well, and then you take a look at the de-escalation. So, for example, just recently with the federal shock troops, whatever you want to call them, because the American Gestapo in Portland. Once those troops were pulled back, Trump's Homeland Security Secret Police, once they pulled back, things calmed down. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Things weren't burning anymore and such. I mean, just in a matter of a day or so. And so there's a thing as well, though, and I don't know if you experience this because I think this is more federal side of things.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, 3 strikes you're out. And so that was obviously considered rather draconian, and because arrest rates were so disproportionately more people of color were getting tied to it, right? So there's this get tough on crime measures that people supposedly wanted without actually thinking of the consequences, or perhaps they were and they're okay with that. But judges' hands were tied with mandatory sentencing measures.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with crazy stories of people like life prison sentences for stealing a $160 jacket. That's the Timothy Jackson one, who was also a habitual offender. But Alvin Kennard, he was 22. This was in Alabama. It was 1984. So he stole $50 from a bakery. But the judge had no other option, because given Alabama state law at the time, it was mandated that since this was his fourth offense, he was sentenced for life without the possibility of parole for stealing $50.
Yeah, that's obviously
So
over the top.
it's over the top. I mean, but it's not necessarily an isolated incident either.
In California, California has its own three strikes, and the legislature admitted it because of those draconian outcomes, that when that third strike does not involve violence, that then you would not get those augmented sentences, and that was perceived to be a big victory for some reform, because those outcomes are just way too harsh.
Yeah, you're not seeing this, and then on top of that, so one is, obviously the judge's hands are tied. They're going, oh my gosh, I mean, this guy does not deserve life without parole for stealing $50. Yes, this is his fourth crime, but he's not a violent criminal. He needs rehabilitation, not incarceration.
The problem is we have a system that does not give credit for the kind of stuff that you're talking about, Rupert, where you keep crime down. We don't have a system that says if a police officer is working in a neighborhood and he keeps crime down, people go to him, he resolves problems, that we don't have a way to give that person credit for what he does. We don't promote based on that. We promote based on the number of arrests. So everything is an arrest.
Right.
And that seems to me to be the problem.
Yeah, we're talking a culture problem in terms of what categories are worthy and are actually connected to doing your job. Making a bunch of arrests just to say you've made arrests is, in my opinion, is not doing your job. Keeping the crime down, keeping the community. If you survey them and they are happy with what's going on in the community because of this police presence, that's the more worthy matrix that we need to be evaluating.
Right.
That shows their effectiveness, not the rest. The rest doesn't even scratch the surface.
Yeah.
Right.
Want a great way to help a worthy organization and educate children about the civil rights movement? Visit our foundation, the Joan Trumpauer Mulholland Foundation, at thejtmfoundation.org. That's thejtmfoundation.org. We are a 501c3 established to help end racism through education. A $5 monthly recurring donation will provide curriculum for 30 students. As my mother used to say, I can't do everything, but I can do something, because doing nothing is not an option. If you have wanted to help in this cause, but didn't know how, now you can. The Joan Trumpauer Mulholland Foundation at thejtmfoundation.org.
So we have this example in Utah that just came up. So this is the 29th and the 30th of July, 2020. So a man is arrested, faces up to 40 years in federal prison after this large marijuana bust near Wendover, which is on the border of Nevada. And of course, the pictures is police, car, cruiser with, state trooper cruiser with just mounds of marijuana bags and stuff. I mean, like these giant Ziploc bags. The next day, so this guy's facing up to 40 years. A foster mom gets 1 year in jail after pleading guilty to killing her 2-year-old child. I mean, good grief.
Wait a minute, a foster mom gets what?
She gets 1 year in jail after pleading guilty to killing a 2-year-old foster child that was in her care.
Whoa.
And she's a nurse. Now, her picture looks like she's probably the one that was taking drugs anyways. So maybe all this was for her. But at the end of the day, it's like, you see this disproportionate application of the law which is kind of what we're coming around to. Obviously, it's the discretion of the judges, but man, you can get judges who are just as biased as the police or as the prosecutors. Again, that system. And so this is where we come back to what you were saying in regards is we need more black representation, more Hispanic representation, people of color within the system itself. But what's preventing that?
But before you answer that question, because a lot of people, like when I was in Chicago, a lot of the cops were black, and they acted the same way the white cops did. As a matter of fact, they acted worse. We used to have the same problem in New York. So I agree with you that you need that, but you need a particular kind of person, whether he's black or white. But if you want him to be black, then he's black. But he understands that his job is not to go in and arrest people, but to go in and solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them are told to do that. So I don't care if we get, and I'm gonna disagree on this, but I don't care if we get a whole bunch of black folks. If their job is not to go in and solve problems, we're gonna end up in the same place.
I agree with that. Let's look at the Latasha Harlins situation in 1992 when the Korean woman shot Natasha Harlins in the back of the head, unarmed, and the woman got 6 months probation. 6 months probation for shooting an unarmed teenage black girl in the back of the head.
Oh my God.
Fast forward to today, I'm asking people now that I'm in this task force about elimination of bias, I'm asking around, and I don't think I have anybody to say that they would have given that sentence. But no one seems to want to come out and say, well, why did she give that sentence? Why would you say when a person takes another person's life that they don't even go to jail for it?
Yeah.
And we're looking at, well, it's because of the victim. And that's the whole, that's, in my view, that's the quintessential philosophic statement for when we say Black Lives Matter. When the life of this teenage black girl is taken away without justification, legal or otherwise, and there's no consequence for that, because you've had sentences where a dog is killed and you spend more time in jail than what this woman did.
Jesus Christ.
So, and of course, the riots erupted. And you can't be surprised that the community would respond to that type of devaluation of a person's life.
Yeah.
And so when we look at that, and I'm kind of going to revisit that with my colleagues as to, one, how that happened and how we can't let that happen. That there should be some symmetry between the sentences that are given to white people for the same crimes that black people are committing.
Yeah.
There should not be a different scale, a different cheat sheet, if you will. Like, oh, so we have a white person in sentence, we're going to pull out these guidelines. For a black person for the same crime, no, we're going to use these guidelines. That's the problem, and that's a problem that we need to attack in earnest.
The cynical argument would be like, well, you shouldn't have stolen something. If you weren't stealing something, you wouldn't have gotten shot. That sort of nonsense. But then you layer in. Now, this wasn't in the case of Harlan's case at the time, because I don't think the law existed back then. But this new stand your ground, where you're allowed to actually pull out a gun and you can make up all sorts of excuses as to why you had to shoot someone and kill them. So now all of a sudden people can become the judge, jury, and executioner on an instant. But those laws seem to be created to protect those very acts. So it's like no justice, no peace. Black Lives Matter. Hey, we're offended that we're really upset that you're killing all of us, and nothing's happening. So it's like all of a sudden, okay, we got to bring him to court now, right? Okay, we got to actually start prosecuting this. People are actually catching on that we're allowing this to take place. But now all of a sudden, we're going to create another law that says, hey, look, as long as you're standing your ground, you're okay. We're going to create justifications now for why you can do this and create legal parameters that makes it okay to kill a black person. Now we're just legalizing it.
Well, it's not uncommon, as history tells us, that laws were created and designed to protect white privilege, to advance white rights over black rights. Racial covenant is a quick, easy example. That made it illegal for blacks to live in certain neighborhoods to qualify for certain types of loans. Rules were created to prevent blacks from voting, with the grandfather clause. We're familiar with all these different legal devices used to protect that status quo.
To make white people feel comfortable, feel safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then you get to these things. Now you get to a point where like recreational and medical marijuana becomes more mainstream, less stigmatized or criminalized. When it's discovered that white people can make money on it.
Oh my goodness! So in my in my assignment right now, I have quite a few of these dispensary cases wherein it's legal out here, and so those licenses to run a dispensary, it's like the golden ticket with Charlie Bucket and Willy Wonka. If you have that license, that's the goose that keeps laying the gold eggs. And there's a lot of litigation between people trying to own those licenses outright, and various LLCs having fights about that. But by and large, you're not seeing people of color, the ones who are in jail, have these criminal records for dealing on the street, but now it's illegal. They don't get to participate. And it's just something that sits in my craw about that whenever I have those cases, and lots of money involved. And at one point in time, it was criminalized and shunned upon, but now it's a thriving business for which people of color are still, now that it's legalized, they're still excluded.
Still marginalized. So yeah, so when white people started self-medicating with meth and marijuana, suddenly arresting them wasn't the solution, but treatment was what was needed.
Oh yeah, that didn't happen with crack. That didn't happen with crack though.
No.
Right.
Obviously, there's the obvious discrimination based on that, but is there a plus side in respects of that? Well, if treatment is the solution, then maybe we can start viewing that within the black community. Is that taking place, or are we still criminalizing the black community for drug use while we provide treatment options for white addicts and so forth?
Yeah, I don't see it happening. Mind you, I'm not in the criminal anymore, so I'm not actually. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just curious. Okay.
Yeah, short answer, I'm not sure.
I want you to share this one last story, because you and I had this discussion. I thought it was so fascinating, wherein now I pointed out that when you told the story, that it was because the lawyers they didn't see your face, they saw your race, right?
Oh, yeah.
And this is so the setup is that you were at a conference. That you were there to, if correct me if I'm wrong, you were at a legal conference and you're actually there to speak on bias.
Oh yes.
And so the night before, you are dressed up in the suit, just like everyone else. You're mingling with these attorneys. There's the booths, because this is a conference. There's booths there and everything else, and people selling stuff and whatever else. Mm-hmm. The majority of the people there are white lawyers. Mm-hmm. And take it from there.
Thank you again for listening. Make sure you head to my Patreon page at patreon.com/LokiMulholland. Show a little love if you can. and get access to even more content. Until next time, don't be afraid to get uncomfortable.